In this video, I'm going to talk about the new features of EventSentry version 5.1 as compared with the previous release of 5.0. And I'm going to just walk through all the new features, new components, improvements, and so forth that have been made. Of course, installing 5.1 is simple. Just run the setup as always. Run through the configuration assistant, update the database schema. That may take a little longer with this release since we've added some indexes to the event log table. And let's start with the first big feature that we added to EventSentry 5.1, which is Anomaly Detection, which is a new feature that's part of event log filters. So let's take a look here. So we have the Anomaly Rules package here that's going to be part of any default installation. It can also be downloaded, of course. And how the anomaly detection works is we're essentially allowing, you can now link keys and values of insertion strings of events. So feature relies heavily on insertion strings. It's going to work best with Windows security events, sysmon events, and any other event that uses insertion strings. And you're essentially combining keys and values and detecting if a new value is associated with the same key. So best example would be a process, right? So a user starts a process. So here we have the key, subject user, target user. So this is the user. And then we have the value, which is the process name. So EventSentry builds a database, in this case over 1 week, associates usernames with a process, and this is all done on the agent, by the way, not on the collector. So this is all evaluated on the agent side. And essentially builds that database over 1 week. And if after 1 week that user starts a process that had previously not been seen, it's going to be considered an anomaly. And you can then decide what to do with that. For example, try an acknowledgement for that event, as is done here. So here we have a new option here that says process events with anomaly. It says anomaly detected. We are requiring acknowledgement. And this is highly flexible. So this, you can set up your own rules. We have a few standard rules set up, detecting logons, for example, from users who had not logged on to that computer. So one great way to go about analyzing and looking at these events is by going to the new Acknowledgement Tile. So this will actually show you all the events that have been collected that require an acknowledgement. You can also see the name of the filter and some event details. So you can click the event and you can, of course, add a comment if you'd like, or you can simply acknowledge the event. You'll see that the acknowledgement checkbox has been checked, and we can close this again, and then that event will disappear. So you can review things that have been showing up and essentially acknowledge them one by one. Right, so here we can see that SVC host has launched a new process called sc.exe. So this is, of course, just a test, just to illustrate how this feature works. In reality, you may want to exclude system processes, for example, and so forth, but this is just for illustration purposes. That third event here popped up because that tile is currently restricted to only show 3 events. But in any case, it's a great feature to detect anomalies, to detect things that you wouldn't usually see, and not necessarily something that will immediately raise an alarm, but it's something to continuously look at and get a better idea of, okay, where could there be potentially suspicious behavior. Another new feature is the permission inventory. So if we take a look here, features, permissions, this allows you to tell EventSentry that you want to enumerate, inventory the permissions of select folders. In this case, it's just the program files folders that I've set up as a test on the EventSentry server. But the best part about it is, well, you can now filter permissions on users, for example. So, age-old question, standard question is, well, which folders, which files does this user have access to? Well, you can answer that question easily now by simply going to the permission inventory page, selecting the user, for example, built-in power users, and you can immediately see, okay, well, these users have explicit permissions on that folder. You can click the details tab here. You can see that for some reason there's explicit permissions set on this file to the power users, maybe because they need to be able to edit that file. You can click on that folder here, and you can see all the permissions that have been granted. So in this particular case, those power users just have read access, but you can also see all the other permissions. This is configured in the management console. This is a new feature under security and compliance. We can see the package right here, permission inventory. So very straightforward, simply add the folders, how often you want it to be refreshed, and you have the permission inventory in the web reports. Going back to the web reports, another new feature or an improvement is the database usage page. So that has been greatly improved. We can now see more information on, especially on Postgres. You can see some configuration settings here that are important for performance, working memory, maintenance, working memory, ability. Auto vacuum is on, shared buffer size, which version you're running, and so forth. You can also see all the local drives on the server that's running the database. And on the bottom here, you may notice that there is a little bit more information here, whether indexes are bloated, for example, trends. So if there is a particular feature that's starting to add more and more data, more so than usual, then you will see an increase here in the trend line. So these features here are pretty stable. So all the lines are just horizontal. There's no increase here. But another really great feature that we added in 5.1 are the automated database maintenance jobs. So you no longer have to mess with the ESDB purge utility in the application schedule in EventSentry or with a task scheduler. You can simply create tasks now, maintenance tasks, in the web reports, and they'll run those jobs for you. You have a nice visual interface. So here you can see I have two maintenance jobs, one for 45 days, one for 14 days. You can click edit. You can see how it's configured. Okay, here we're removing any data that's older than 45 days at 11 p.m. So very, very convenient. You can access these here under the database usage page, or you can go to the maintenance wizard and see the information here as well. And of course, you can still run on-demand maintenance wizard jobs. And there's a third place where these are accessible because they are jobs that are on in the background, and that would be under the reports jobs page. Now, talking about database and optimization, we also added under the database action in the management console the ability to optimize the built-in Postgres database. So simply click that little button here and you'll see the settings here. You can click on recommended settings, which will tweak the settings here, and then you can see the configuration file that's being used by EventSentry. You can see the new configuration options. You can tweak it. You can see how the values are essentially changing here. You can see the valid range of settings that you could basically perform, and recommended settings basically adjust the settings based on the RAM that you have available on that computer. And once you're done, once you have tweaked them and set the settings as you liked, you can click the save button. Or you can open the configuration file in an editor and edit it manually. Clicking the more info button will bring you to our KP article. We've also improved the troubleshooting, the status of the collector status page. So we've got rid of the invalid packets row all the way on the bottom and replaced it with a latency chart. So now you can see, okay, how long does it take for the collector to process data? How long is the database latency? And how long does it take for a packet that comes in before it's actually fully processed? So here we can see that on average, it takes about 800 milliseconds for data to be processed, and the database latency is pretty low. And clicking on the connections page, there's an improvement here as well. We now have a throughput column. You can now see which agents are sending the most data. And what's also nice is if you don't have access to the web reports, or if you're already in the management console, you can click on the collector page here, and you'll actually see some of the stats right here in the management console. You can see how many connections. You can see a green check mark, essentially confirming that everything is healthy, the queues are not too big, and the latency is not too high. You'll also notice that the clear text communication is gone. So the collector, starting with version 5.1, only supports TLS secured connections, so no more clear text connections. Remote update had also been improved to access the collector directly. So when you're managing computers that you can't reach directly, so for example, all these machines under Docker WAL are behind a NAT firewall, so we can't access them directly. If I just do a check status, or if I were to ping them, it would be unsuccessful. But EventSentry now knows that these machines might be connected to the collector. So if I do a check status here and click go, it will try to get that information to status directly from the collector status, similar to what you see on the connections page here. And you'll see, okay, running and connected to collector, last activity so many seconds ago. If I were to do the same thing in 5.0, it would simply say request timed out, because the management console cannot reach those computers directly. You may have also noticed in version 5.0 that when you just open the management console, navigate it around, view the filter, view an action, and then exit it again, that the management console would prompt you to save. So we've improved that a lot, and the management console in about 90% of the cases will now only prompt you to save when you've actually made a change. So if you just view a filter and exit the management console, it won't bother you and ask you to save 100 times. Instead, only when you actually make a change will it prompt you to save. We've also added a neat little go-to button here. So we already had the ability to find filters, for example, but with the go-to option, you can find any item in the tree quickly without having to, expand all the little items. So if I just type in, for example, ABC, which is down here, launch ABC, then it will immediately select that. If I say threat, for example, and hit next, then we'll find the thread until here, and I can just kind of move through it and find everything that's related to threat. We've also vastly improved and completely rewritten the mechanism to sync packages. So it was already possible in 5.0 to download the latest packages, but that process was a little bit slow because it was actually downloading a reg file that had to be imported in the background. And it took a few seconds and it was a little bit clunky. Sometimes filters would show up in the wrong folders. You wouldn't be able to update or refresh existing filters. Only new filters could get added. So this has been vastly improved. You can access this feature here under with this button here, the refresh or the update button here. Here it says that the latest update check was done on the 1st of October. We can hit check now. It says packages are up to date already, continue anyways. So since I've made some changes in the background, it thinks that there are no changes, but we're just going to say yes here. We're going to download, and here we have an update anomaly rules. So normally hitting import would take several seconds. It would be a manual refresh in the background, but now if you hit that button, the update is almost instant. And what was updated here is simply some things in the anomaly detection engine here. So a new processor and an update to a filter, for example. Also improved in the management console is now the ability to write data to multiple actions, and that affects pretty much most of the system health and security compliance objects. So for example, in the inventory object in the past, you were only able to select one database. Now this action field here that supports multiple databases is available in every single dialog. Services, for example, multiple actions here and down to compliance. So all these features in 5.0 and earlier would only let you select one action. Now you can have multiple actions. So if you want to have if you have two database actions, for example, one where you keep data for 30 days, one where you keep data for 1 year, well, that's no problem anymore. You can assign this to every single feature in EventSentry. A DMonitor can now be configured to send data through the collector as well. So this was previously only available for Heartbeat and network services. So especially for MSPs, if you're running separate installations of EventSentry in a customer network, but you want to store the data on site, on premise, on your network, well, now even a DMonitor can send all the data back to your installation. And with a DMonitor, there's a slight improvement here. We added the ability under the group inventory to see when a group was last changed. So this gives you the ability to sort this output here, for example, and see exactly, okay, well, which groups have recently been changed, and maybe review the membership of those groups here. And finally, for those users that have to be CMMC compliant, we added a couple of dashboards for level 1 and level 2 to EventSentry. We've updated the reports as well, but the main improvement is that you now have a nice CMMC dashboard where you can see exactly what the status of your CMMC compliance as it pertains to EventSentry is. So a lot more actionable than just running the reports, which is great. So the reports are important. They're there, you can run them, but you now have this dashboard that visualizes some of that data, makes it a little bit easier, and a little more useful to be and stay CMMC compliant. So every column here shows exactly what those tiles should do. So tiles should show okay. Tiles should show okay here. So there's two where we have issues here. Here it's just tiles with activity. So you can see if something changed. Those are not necessarily problems, but are things that you should look at. And then again, here we have, for example, domain users, domain admins, obviously a very small test network with just a few users. We also added a TISAX dashboard. And again, remember, we add dashboards by clicking on change settings and then clicking the import button. And there's a bunch of more dashboard templates available here. TISAX, a compliance requirement from the German car industry, for example. And that pretty much wraps it up. Of course, there is numerous improvements under the hood in the web reports. For example, you'll notice here if you click on settings that all the tile options have been improved quite a bit. But overall, a lot of bug fixes, a lot of performance improvements in the backend here as well that made it to 5.1. Thanks for watching.